You're very welcome. Radio Espial episode 68. As you can see there, the picture to my side, Grace Livingstone. That is the case we are dealing with, the murder of Grace Livingstone, Malahide, 1992. Very quickly, thank you to all the recent subscribers. The channel continues to grow. Brian is with us shortly, Brian Goggin. We're going to go through a full timeline. Brian, thanks for joining us. As always, you're very welcome.
Mick. Thanks for having us there. And hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in and all your subscriptions there as well.
The murder of Grace Livingstone, 1992. We're going to start off, as we always do, with the case summary and the case background. So, Grace Livingstone, a 56-year-old Irish mother and housewife living in Malahide, Dublin, was murdered in her bedroom in brutal circumstances on December the 7th, 1992, with a single shotgun bullet to the back of her head. Her killer has never been identified and no motive has ever been determined, despite extensive re-examinations of the case. It remains one of the most prominent Irish cold case murders of the 1990s. Initially, suspicions grew around her husband, a senior tax inspector for the Irish Revenue Commissioners, and that the fatal single shot had been fired from a rifle he owned and kept in their home. Now, this is a detailed and complex case, including Garda mishaps, High Court actions that were taken over many years, and a long-standing cold case that probably should have been solved within weeks, if not days. This is the Radio Espial timeline for the Grace Livingstone murder. Now, we're going to get into real details here. This is our case background. Grace Ní Bhfearnan, her maiden name, Livingstone, was born in 1936. Originally from County Louth, Ireland, she met her husband James, we'll be referring to him as is Jimmy Livingstone, from County Monaghan, and the couple married in October 1968. That's Jimmy there, Jimmy very much in later years. Jimmy worked for the Irish Revenue Commissioners as a civil servant, and his work took them to several living locations, originally Whitehall in Dublin, Castlebar in Mayo, and eventually to their settled home by the mid-1970s at number 37, the Moorings, Malahide, a quiet cul-de-sac in a very affluent middle-class area in North Dublin. They were actually one of the first young Irish families to move into this newly built estate. The area housed the families of many professionals working in the health, legal, police and defence forces. With the beaches of Malahide just walking distance away, the area was idyllic for raising two young children. And for Grace and Jimmy, that was Tara and Connor, their son and daughter. An intrinsic Irish Catholic family, the couple were very social in the area of Malahide, but still kept their County Louth and Monaghan roots active with many family visits. That is the home, number 37, the Moorings, Malahide. As Jimmy's civil servant career flourished to a senior role as a tax investigator in Dublin City into some of Ireland's criminal cases of large fraudulent activity, Grace busied her life raising Tara and Connor at home while becoming a member of the Portmarnock Flower Club and Malahide Horticultural Society. Their back garden was a pride and joy, cultivating plants and various fauna, and she would often join Jimmy on his shooting and fishing trips, more to gather and cultivate the next clippings for the garden at home. They were very much an outdoor couple and well recognised and respected in the area as they walked their German pointer dog out on an evening or weekends. They also kept a boat on the River Shannon for their getaways as their children grew older. Frisbee the cat always got a look in as well. By 1992, Tara, their daughter, was 22 years of age and now living in Paris and working for an accountancy firm. Connor, their son, aged 20, was studying in college at Dundalk at the RTC in electronics, but he was still living at home for most of the time in Malahide. In December 1992, he'd also taken up a part-time job at Dr. Quirky's amusement arcade in Dublin City. Brian, again, you're very welcome. Anything before we really get into the timeline? Any opening thoughts?
Yeah, it's strange case, Mick. You know, I don't know. It's a strange, as I said there. I think agreed there. Long-standing cold case that should have been solved within weeks, if not days. Really, I think they were barking up the wrong tree with a couple of things, and you know, it's very, very sad that this woman, justice never attained for this woman, for her husband and kids well grown up now, like, you know. But yeah, there's a lot in here. It's kind of surprising it wasn't progressed. But that's it. Yeah,
it's definitely a strange and unusual case, and you'll find that out as we get into our timeline. We're straight in. This is the day of the murder. It's Monday, December the 7th, 1992. Now, I've got an image up there. This is the housing estate. This is a more recent photograph in recent Google Map years of the moorings in Malahide. It didn't quite look as extensive as this. You'll see a key there. I will put this image up. In fact, if I can do it now, you can pause it, you can hold it, you can have a look at it, because there are people in this. You can see the key there on the right. There are house numbers, there's witnesses. I'm not going to keep flicking back to this map, but during our timeline we're going to refer to people and house numbers, and this is the map you need to go back to. If I think of it on certain times, we'll flick back to this map, but this is an important map that you need to keep in mind. Now, Monday, December the 7th, 1992, the day of the murder. This was the start of a new working week for the family at 37 The Moorings cul-de-sac in Malahide. They'd been living at the Malahide housing estate for 16 years. Christmas, remember, was just 3 weeks away, but for now, the Livingstone family continued their normal working week routine. With Tara living away in Paris, Jimmy Livingstone and his son Connor had breakfast with Grace. I think Grace was the first one up, and then the boys, Jimmy and the son, shortly after. Much of the discussion is around their evening plans, specifically Jimmy and Grace. There is to be an anniversary mass for Jimmy's brother Peter, who sadly died in 1997, so not that, about 5 years prior to this. And he was a priest in Broomfield, County Monaghan, where Jimmy was originally from. Jimmy and Grace, their plan was to drive there for the mass once Jimmy returned from work, and when Jimmy came home, he'd have a quick bite to eat and off they'd go. The three of them were up around 7 a.m. Now, between 8:20 and 8:25 a.m, Jimmy and Connor left the home in Jimmy's Renault estate car. The family, note, had two cars. Grace's Ford Fiesta was parked in the driveway. Jimmy often parked his Renault estate out in the estate, particularly on work weeks, so he didn't have to disturb anybody and could head off. So at approximately 8:30 a.m, Jimmy and Connor collected Art O'Connor, Jimmy's work colleague, from Chalmford Avenue, a short drive from their own home. I think it's they lived on one side of Malahide village. Chalmford was on the opposite side of the village. At approximately 8:30, Jimmy collects Art, who is his work colleague, and they drive from their home. Jimmy and Art had long embraced the idea of carpooling by 1992. It was now just Jimmy and Art on the morning journey. Previously, they collaborated with other people in this carpooling, but ultimately it just came down to them. But it suited them, because they both worked in the civil service for the Revenue Commissioner's offices, both at Setanta House on Nassau Street in Dublin City, but on different floors and departments in the building. Now, passing through O'Connell Street, Dublin, Jimmy quickly dropped off Connor around 9 a.m. within a few hundred yards of his amusement job at Quirky's, and Jimmy and Art were then at their office desks around about 9:10 a.m.
Just decades since you could do a commute like that now.
I was just going to say,
you'd be Malahide at 8:30. You'd be lucky if you got a mile or two down the road. It's just
I know. It's just and that's a good point, Brian, because bear that in mind. Don't think of. We always say this.
Go back
when
to
we
the time,
do put yourself in these timelines. Put yourself back in that time. Don't superimpose what you think you know now and how it is now back then, because that ain't the way it worked, good or bad. Now, meanwhile, back at home in the mornings, it's around 9 a.m. Malahide, Grace Livingstone was following her normal routine and had departed in her Ford Fiesta for the local village church, St. Sylvester's, for 9 a.m. Mass, something she did most days. She was familiar and well liked there, often helping out with the flower arranging in the church and the grounds. She had recently worked on producing holly wreaths, the holly gathered on one of Jimmy's recent fishing and hunting trips, for display on the fairs of the Church of Ireland and the Catholic churches in Malahide. No doubt this kept her busy for a little time that morning. Before returning home, she stopped off at a local supermarket. It's believed just before or in and around 11:45 a.m. Malahide neighbour Bernard Owens, he lives at number 38, remember our map, in the mornings, spots Grace in her driveway, and the pair exchange a quick chat about family plans for Christmas. We believe that that's when Grace, she would have taken her time, loved, enjoyed the church and moving from one place to the other, then the supermarket, so she would have taken her time that morning. We believe around 11:30, 11:45 is when she actually arrived there, and this is likely the time that Bernard Owens at number 38, the moorings, spots Grace, who's in her driveway. So in that moment, he has no idea how he will next see Grace Livingstone the following day. I want you to remember that. Bernard heads off with his family to Dunleary and then Bray, not knowing that this was the last time he would ever see her. At 12:50 p.m, in subsequent Garda interviews with Jimmy Livingstone, the husband, he stated that he phoned their Malahide home at around, he believes, 12:50 p.m, just approaching his lunch break at work. His call went unanswered. At 1 p.m, Jimmy Livingstone at Setanta House in Nassau Street in Dublin City meets up with a work colleague, and he and Joe Stone, the work colleague, travel by car to Marion College in Ballsbridge for a quick swim in the pool area. This is something they do most Monday lunchtimes. Brian, I thought about that, and I looked at the maps and I thought, well, I've never done that drive at that time ever in 1992, and I thought, would you consider that a long distance, or is that a bit of a...
Well, I don't know. It was 10 years later, or less than 10 years later, when I lived in Dublin, and it was chock a block, especially at lunchtime. So
it just struck me as, jeez, lads, I know it's just Ballsbridge, but
by the time you got down there and back,
get in. It's like, what did you do? Jump in for a 10-minute swim and get back?
Yeah, exactly. Because you're going, you'd have to go all the way down past Trinity and
Yeah,
down either Grand Canal or Mount Street or Bagot Street and down that way,
yeah.
wouldn't you?
I thought, the incident, it's, God, lads, it's a real, well, okay, fair enough, lads, but it's no wonder you only did it once a week, because you certainly wouldn't be doing that every day. But however, that is what they did. It was verified.
Yeah.
Now, 1:50 to 2:10 p.m. we're back in Malahide. Anne Watchorn walks across the moorings on a, if I haven't stressed this, it's a cul-de-sac for our American or anybody. It means you drive in one end of the street, you ain't going anywhere the other end, you've got to turn around and go back out. There's no throughway through the road. So at number 37, Grace Livingstone, she is returning a flower basket she had borrowed. This is Anne Watchorn. The two women, very good friends, chat at the front door of the Livingstone home for about 15 minutes. The two together had organised the sale of work the day before, which was the Sunday, and Grace makes mention to Anne that she and Jimmy are heading to Monaghan that evening. This is Peter's anniversary, Jimmy's brother, and she better get something prepared for a quick dinner, because they've got to dash, when he gets home, they've got to dash in, dash out. It is the last time Anne Watchorn will ever see her friend Grace alive. At that time, Grace Livingstone was wearing a check blouse, woolen cardigan, black trousers, and had the front of her hair in rollers, with the rest tied back in a ponytail. And again, that was sort of classic of the time, perhaps indicating that Grace was already in the throes of making preparations for their mass event that evening in Monaghan. Now, 2:15 p.m. Jimmy and Joe Stone, they've gone swimming at Ballsbridge, coming back on lunch break, return to Satanta House in Nassau Street, and Jimmy remains there on the third floor until he meets Art O'Connor. Remember the guy that they carpooled with? And that was around 5 p.m. for their return home to Malahide at the end of the working day. So that's their plan. Jimmy has come back to lunch at 2:15, and his next plan, and we know he never left that building at Satanta House until 5 p.m. to pick up Art in the car park. We're back to Malahide. It's now 4:30 p.m. 4 teenage girls, just out from a nearby school, stop at the corner of the moorings cul-de-sac. They chat for a few minutes before splitting up and going to their home in the local area. They see a man they do not recognise, around 19 to 22 years of age, but that's their estimation. Remember, they're teenage girls. And this guy has turned up at the moorings and he's walking around the area. It is a cold day and he's wearing a below knee-length fawn trench coat, thin built, blonde parted hair in the middle, and seems well groomed. There are other sightings of this man who was maybe more dark haired with collar length hair. Some of these sightings vary. One of the girls, Ina Brennan, 17, she lives at, by the way, at number 32, would later in Garda statements say that he seemed rich, well-to-do, so the girls didn't think anything more of it until questioned in later days. Her friend Hilary Maguire would also provide a similar statement.
Bear in mind as well, this is December, so 4:30 coming up to 5. It's not
dark. Yeah,
the lighting wouldn't be the best.
So 4:40 p.m. a landscape gardener by the name of Philip McGeevney is walking across the road from number 37, and he's cutting treetops. This is number 37 in the moorings, so it's across the road, almost not quite direct from number 37. So 27, 37, they're opposite sides of the road. Again, numbering, please look at the map. It doesn't consequently work with even and odd numbers. We've been through
Yeah,
this
they go
before.
consecutive, like in Britain,
They
like
go
in London, all the odd
consecutive,
numbers are on one side, and the evens are on the other, and so on.
So again, with this kind of, don't make assumptions.
Yeah.
The numbers work consecutively on either side of the road.
Yeah.
So this gardener, Philip McGeevney, he packs away his tools into his Nissan Vanette. He regularly works in the area and is familiar with the locale. Two young boys are out with a football on the end of the road, the cul-de-sac. Rather than disturb the lads with his van pointing away from the cul-de-sac exit, which is out towards to get out onto the main road, the coastal road, he chooses to do a U-turn on the road and uses a driveway to pull into, and then reverses back out of it. Now, in that moment, he has no idea he is entering the sloped driveway of number 37, the moorings. The light is already well fading, almost dark, and it's a winter's day, and he has the van headlights on as well. But what he does see is what he thinks is a man in the front porch, with possibly the door slightly open, sliding door. The outer door, that should read, the inner door is closed, but the main hallway door is open, and the man, possibly a student in his early 20s, seemed to be uprooting a pot plant in the porch that had been knocked over. The landscape gardener does not recall a car being in the driveway, and being a gardener, he was later able to identify the spilled pot plant as a yucca plant, and Grace Livingstone did indeed have a yucca plant in her porch when the porch was later forensically detailed and inspected. We're on to 5 to 5:05 p.m. Having met in the Nassau Street car park back in Dublin City, Jimmy and Art head home from to Malahide. Connor has already let his dad know by phone that he has to work a little later and that he will get the Dart train home instead. And he generally, if he had to get the train home, he would get it from Tara Street. Now at 5:45 p.m, the lads, Art O'Connor with Jimmy driving, they stop off at Chalfont Avenue. Art is dropped off. Jimmy then makes the short journey through Malahide village onto the other side and finally into the moorings. He knows he and Grace have to leave soon, so he makes sure his Renault Estate is parked outside and facing towards the end of the cul-de-sac exit. Grace's Ford Fiesta is parked in the driveway. Note, there is only room for one car in the driveway. That was a common theme that neighbours often said in the area. It wasn't the widest of streets, and if you came in with your car and you wanted if you were dropping something in, you wanted to come back out, you had a tendency to turn the car and make it prepared for the exit, because it was very awkward in the cul-de-sac to turn around. Now, 5:50 p.m. Jimmy Livingstone enters his home, and he has to unlock it with keys. Almost straight away, some things do not seem right. The house is unusually dark. There is no light coming from the kitchen when he steps inside the inner hallway. He later will note that the curtains are drawn in a room they should not generally be. Grace is very particular about light and sunshine in certain houses, rooms, due to the plants. He walks into the kitchen at the rear of the house, and the table is unset, and there's no dog to greet him. A brush is propped up against the wall, and there's a small pile of dirt and a little dustpan are still sitting on the floor. His immediate thought, later related that evening to police, was that Grace was either not home and the house vacant since it got dark, or that she was lying down upstairs and had fallen asleep, perhaps ill, not realising how dark it was and how late it was. He switches the hall and landing lights on and goes upstairs. At the top of the stairs landing, he notices his own .22 caliber case lying on its butt end against a bedroom door jamb. None of Jimmy's collection of hunting rifles and guns are left out randomly in the house. They are all stored away. Remember, he's a hunter and fisherman. He enters their bedroom, refrains from switching a light on, still believing that Grace has fallen asleep upstairs in the late afternoon. He makes out the shadow of Grace, he thinks, lying across the bed, reaches out and feels for her head and forehead to wake her. His hand is immediately moist. Grace does not stir. He turns on the bedroom light and sees blood on his hands. At first, feeling the moistness, he had thought she was sick and vomited. At 5:58 p.m, Irish Emergency Services record a call logged at this time from their 999 service. Later statements will reveal that Jimmy Livingstone fled their bedroom and ran to Anne Watchorn's house across the road. Again, see the map. Not getting an immediate answer, he went to Anne's next door neighbour, Margaret Murphy, who was a retired nurse. Her son answered the door and called to his mother. Jimmy, without waiting, fled back to the house and made the emergency phone call to 999. That was at the 5:58 mark. Margaret left Jimmy on the phone and went upstairs. She noted some form of tape tying Grace's hands and ankles up, with her feet close together, and Grace lying on the bed face down. There was blood on the back of Grace's head and her neck. Margaret did immediately notice that the blood on Grace's had already started to congeal. Jimmy came up and used his pocket knife to cut Grace's spines. Margaret could not find any pulse. They moved Grace on the bed to clear airwaves and realised that her mouth was also bound with a black adhesive tape, just in case, because I know somebody's going to say it. How did you come so quick with this? It was one of those pocket knife. Again, he's a hunter, he's a fisherman. He was carrying a one of those fold-up things. Margaret told Jimmy to go back downstairs and phone 999 once again. Word spreads quickly through the housing estate as concerned neighbours came out. At 6:05, 6:10 p.m, Father John Keegan, a close family friend, arrived just as the emergency services arrived in an ambulance. Across the road, Anne Watchorn came to the front of her house and noticed the flashing blue lights across the street through a window. 6:15 p.m, Detective Frank Gunn and Garda Catherine Moran arrive at the house. At 6:35 p.m, family doctor Barry Modley arrived at the house and formally pronounced Grace Livingstone dead in situ. By now, both distraught, Margaret Murphy brought Jimmy away from the scene and over to her house. Jimmy was still saying he knew who did this. He was frantic and he was hysterical as described. At 6:30 to 6:45 p.m, meanwhile, Connor, Grace and Jimmy's son had left his work shift and was making his way to Tara Street Station for the Dart train home. He could not be contacted. Gardaí had arrived and there was much effort to calm Jimmy. He wanted to drive and collect his son from work in Dublin City. There was a lot of panic and confusion going on at this point in time at 37 The Moorings, Malahide. One of the responding emergency services personnel is Fireman Eamon Burke. The involvement of fire service crews are not uncommon early in these types of incidences of critical cases or sudden death to assist paramedics for immediate access to a patient, transport of a patient, and providing assistance to Gardaí to break through doors, fencing, outhousing at the beginning of a coordinated search for evidences. It will only be years later that we learn Fireman Eamon Burke did disclose to Gardaí that he was somewhat thrown off under the chaotic circumstances when offered tea and mince pies by Jimmy Livingstone that evening. Gardaí were later still struggling to protect the scene of what now clearly looked like a cold-blooded murder, and they felt with what Jimmy was saying they needed to isolate and remove him from the scene immediately. Brian, there's a lot in there, I'm going to stop. Any thoughts, anything you want to add?
Clearly very distraught by the whole, you can't imagine what they're going through, him in particular, also the neighbour, you come home and this is what you find, and interesting, he said he knew who did this, that's the interesting to know what who he thought did it, and if any of that was taken seriously, number one, and number two, was it actually followed up as well, if he communicated
at the time, yeah.
We had a dreadful scene, dreadful.
Okay, 7:15 p.m. Jimmy Livingstone begins an 8-hour interview detainment at Malahide Garda Station. The newly formed investigation team want to quickly establish as many facts as possible. At 8:30 p.m, the Garda Technical Bureau arrive and begin gathering evidence. 8 to 9 p.m, Conor Livingstone heads home to Malahide on the train. Walking through Malahide village, someone who recognises him breaks the horrible news that his mother has been shot dead in their moorings home.
Shocking.
Yeah, not a pleasant way to hear about that. 11 p.m, Jimmy Livingstone's rifle is found under a hedge. I think this
you wonder, was there any effort made, this is
this hours have passed.
3 hours have passed. Was there any kind of radio call down to Store Street to say, listen, can you walk up to the...
go up to Dr. Quirky's amusement and just say, bring his son aside and say, we need to talk to you about something.
Because literally, that arcade is at most 10 minutes walk from Store Street, do you know?
So 11 p.m, Jimmy Livingstone's rifle is found under a hedge. I think it was in shrubbery. And it was a hammerless double-barrel shotgun in the front garden of the house where Gardaí are searching. I think it's a .22 rifle, one of two that he had. This rifle had been originally stored in the couple's bedroom wardrobe that day. 11:30 p.m. State pathologist John Harbison attends the crime scene. He is told that Grace's body was not cold, still perhaps a little warm, and his initial opinion to presiding Gardaí is that death may have occurred closer to 6 p.m. However, local doctor Barry Moodley will dispute this and always maintained in statements and court documents that he was firm in his belief that death occurred approximately 2 hours before his examination at 6:35 p.m. Now, the following day, Tuesday, December the 8th, Jimmy Livingstone left Malahide Garda Station after his lengthy interview in the early hours of the morning. He had given investigators all the information he could, including his own suspicions that his work at the Revenue Commissioner's office and the cases he'd been inspecting had something to do with his wife's murder.
Just go back there again.
Yeah, sure.
What was the final time of death set at,
The final... Okay, let's clarify this because there is...
Yeah.
Moodley was insistent from the time at 6:30 he pronounced death in the house, and that his estimation then was that death occurred, I think in court his estimation was an hour and a half to 2 hours beforehand, so he estimated around 4:30 or not long after. John Harbison at the time when he spoke to Gardaí said, I think it was closer to 6 p.m. But John Harbison didn't examine the body until 11:30 or later.
So he didn't actually feel her?
No. And Margaret Murphy and Jimmy and Gardaí present had touched the body, and they also felt it's slight degree of warmth, indicating that the person had been passed away a while, but not hours and hours, but certainly the person was not warm, or literally shot on the spot, minutes earlier. if we don't go over this again, and I'm glad you brought this up, Brian, John Harbison would later, when challenged in court, and was asked, why did your time of death as being closer to 6 p.m. in the evening, why is there such a discrepancy with Dr. Moodley's, who was actually present closer to the time of the body find? And I think his words were, yes, I have considered that, and I'm not at this point prepared to disagree or reject what Dr. Moodley stated. And that was how he left it.
Because the 999 call was at 5:58.
Yes.
And
yes.
There was the whole, he was home for 10 to 6, 5:50 or whatever, and there was nothing, driving up, it just, it doesn't really add up there. That, you know.
So Tuesday, December the 8th, 1992, Jimmy Livingstone leaves Malahide Garda Station, and that was in the early hours of the morning. He'd given investigators all he could, including his own suspicions that his work at the Revenue Commissioner's office may have something to do with it. Following the removal of Grace's body, local Gardaí, neighbourhood and family friend Bernard Owen provides the formal identification in hospital in the presence of state pathologist John Harbison. Bernard Owen, if you look, I think it's number 38. He lives at literally beside them on one side. During the examination of Grace's body, a cut to the front of her face is noted. A conclusion is drawn from that examination that she may have been struck with a blow in the face to subdue her at some point, and whoever did it created that cut lightly wearing a ring on their finger. The Garda Technical Bureau begin to examine the evidence they have been gathering over the past 12 hours. The heavy-duty gaffer-style tape Grace was bound with comes in for particular attention. Naturally, Jimmy Livingstone's fingerprints are found on the tape close to the areas where the tape was cut open to free Grace. This seems consistent with the statements he gave. However, there are other fingerprint impressions present on both the non-sticky side and a series of fingertip prints on the opposite side, the smooth side, and it's deemed they're most likely of the perpetrator. They are not Jimmy or Grace's fingerprints, and to this day, Gardaí, despite fingerprinting everyone at the crime scene, they have never found a match to them. It was also this day that the local landscape gardener came forward and provided information he had to Gardaí, having seen the case on the evening news and realising this was the exact house he had turned into to leave the housing estate that previous evening. Now, December 1992, the case of Grace Livingstone's murder quickly makes national headlines in Ireland. Speculation, of course, is rife. Media only help to throw coals on the fires of speculation, so much so that even the then provisional IRA terrorist group issue a statement to media to say that they or any of their members were in no way involved in the crime. Over the following days after Grace's murder, neighbours are interviewed. It is soon established that several of them reported hearing a loud sound around 4:30 to 4:40 p.m. That is, again, map, Anne Egan and Margaret O'Sullivan. I think Margaret O'Sullivan lived in the house at the back of the house, so she didn't live on the moorings, she lived behind the house. Some are not sure exactly what it was. Someone suggests it's banging an oil drum with a hammer. Others, familiar with firearms and hunting, were adamant it was a gunshot. I think, I'm just noting activities there. I believe one of the women, I can't remember what it was, I think Anne had just got home and was putting away Christmas presents. I think Margaret O'Sullivan had been hanging out washing at the time, or rather gathering in washing that she left out that day. Now, January, February 1993, progress is slow on such a high-profile case. Speculation and whispers continue in the local Malahide community. Gardaí start to focus in on the reported sightings of a man in his early 20s in the area in a trench coat, tan or beige colour, particularly the accounts of the 4 schoolgirls. Neighbours offer up other information, that there was a similarly described young man calling door to door in the area that early to mid-afternoon of Monday, December the 7th. Several neighbours in the locale area said that a young man called to their doors, identifying himself as a charity collector for the Irish Epilepsy Association. These investigators take some considerable time to explore, and there is understandable concern from the charity about the sharing of private collector data. It will take some time to pursue this line of investigation. But ultimately, the charity confirmed that they did not have any registered collector operating in the Malahide area under their authority and sanction on December the 7th. However, a database list of some 114 names are shared with Gardaí. A small number of those names are flagged as having previous convictions for house burglary and other petty crimes. To Radio Espial's knowledge, no fingerprint match has been made to any of the listed 114 persons on that database provided. March 1993. Jimmy Livingstone is arrested by Gardaí under Section 30 of the Offences Against the State Act. The arrest warrant pertains to firearms, 8 in total, he kept at his Malahide home. As a licensed firearm hunter, from the evening of December the 7th, 1992, Jimmy had provided all documentation he had on the firearms he kept at the house, and he's deeply upset that this action taken against him is nothing more than a distraction in a serious murder case of his wife, and that the investigation team are now struggling to progress. November 1993, Jimmy Livingstone appears at Swords District Court about the Section 30 arrest and charges having been brought against him. It is approaching the 1-year anniversary of his wife's murder. He feels deeply aggrieved that this case was ever brought against him over a gun that can only fire bottle corks, and an historic pre-war gun he inherited from his grandfather. He accepts and agrees that both those guns were not licensed to him, and he agrees to pay a £300 fine. Brian?
Yeah, pretty despicable, really, making.
Yeah, it's this fucking scraping the barrel here stuff.
Total distraction, like, and just very bad, like, the guy had enough on his plate there, and this was nonsense. This was rubbish, like.
It's like, what the fuck are the rest of you guys really doing? Yeah. Okay,
we're a year on nearly as well, like,
Well, we're gonna find out exactly what the boys and girls in the Gardaí were doing. January 1994. So excuse the pun, but the recent escapades backfired on Gardaí. It's clear the previous investigation is going nowhere and is disbanded and passed on by the Deputy Garda Commissioner to a new review team of Gardaí. Detective Superintendent Tom Connolly and Detective Sergeant Todd O'Loughlin from the Garda Serious Crimes Headquarter Unit, the essential core years, later acting as GSCI that would make breakthroughs in several cold cases. Connolly had helped to nail serial killers Evans Shaw, we've done a feature on that, the murder overseas of 3 Irish soldiers, and O'Loughlin was one of the lead detectives in the gangland killing of journalist Veronica Guerin. Again, have a look in the search on the channel. We've covered that case. Monday, the 16th of May 1994, the murder of Grace Livingstone is featured on national TV broadcasters crime alert program, Crimeline. Yeah. Much of the info, alert and detail that followed the public appeal focused on a man running from the pedestrian area of the moorings cul-de-sac and departing in a small Fiesta-style vehicle around 4:40 to 4:45 p.m. in the direction of Malahide village, wearing an overcoat, okay, about 6 feet tall and 25 years of age. Other cars, driving erratically, or people sitting in cars, were brought forward, but nothing ever came from these witness statements. In 1998, Jimmy retires from his work as a senior investigator at the Revenue Commissioners after more than 42 years. During his final years, he appeared before Irish government public inquiry committees to give evidence on banks who would engage in tax evasion. He was actually given an award for his diligent and incisive work and evidence he brought to these committees. Into the 2000s, Jimmy Livingstone engages the services of a retired detective chief superintendent, Mick Burdis, who has 40 years of experience on murder cases in the UK. Now, again, I just want to clarify, I'm not aware that Radio Espial is not aware of any updates from his Mick Burdis' investigations over the years. I don't know what came of them. In 2008, Jimmy, his daughter Tara and son Connor agreed to a settlement at the High Court case after 4 days of a projected 8-week trial they had first taken against the Irish State Gardaí and Minister for Justice for damages in the mid-1990s. And that's the three of them there, Connor, Jimmy and Tara. Jimmy had sued for wrongly suspecting him of the murder and was seeking damages for alleged false imprisonment and abuse of the legal process. His children were also seeking damages for emotional suffering and a breach of their constitutional rights. The state denied the allegations. However, after several hours of discussion between the legal teams, Judge John McNamee was told that the matter had been settled. It is understood that the state did not pay compensation to the family, but agreed to cover all of the legal costs, and the Minister for Justice agreed to present a statement confirming that James Livingstone, through two subsequent investigations, had the full and unreserved presumption of innocence, and that at no stage did the Gardaí ever forward a file to the DPP, Department of Public Prosecutions, to consider him for prosecution for the murder. So, on our timeline postscript cold case, Grace,
big winners there, make the lawyers, like they got big money.
Yeah, they would have got big money. I think there were reputably costs on both sides of up to 1.3 million. Grace Livingstone was murdered 33 years ago. Her murder has never been identified or brought to justice. Jimmy Livingstone couldn't bear to live any longer at 37 The Moorings. As a grandad, he still lives in his beloved Malahide. Tara, his daughter, moved back to Ireland many years ago from France. Connor, his son, still lives in Dublin. The family are very close and resolute in getting justice one day for Grace. Grace Livingstone rests in Malahide Cemetery with a single daughter. She lost 69 days after birth in 1977, named Maeve. They are both together now. Brian, is there anything you want to say before I get into the conclusions and analysis?
Yeah, that's an awful case. Like, it just, and then years, like, you know, nearly 16 years later, 15 and a half years later, they were still fighting the guards about it. Like,
2008,
all that waste and effort there, like, that should have been put into working this case the hard way, like, and just working this case based on the evidence and so on, like, you know. And that gun thing is disgusting, like, you know, and you end up paying a £300 fine on that, like, as well, you know. I mean, it's just appalling, like.
Yeah. Okay, on to our conclusions and analysis. Some considerations before we begin. Pointers. Of all the people who entered 37 The Moorings, Malahide, on the evening of December the 7th, 1992, after 6 p.m, none of them picked up the pungent smell of cordite, which is a type of gunpowder, present in the upstairs bedroom where Grace Livingstone's body lay. This is very common in the immediate aftermath of a firearm being recently discharged in a confined indoor space. Remember, those people included Jimmy Livingstone and Margaret Murphy, first on the scene, and soon after, paramedics, firemen and Gardaí from the emergency response services.
Just, I suppose the other thing to mention there is that like Jimmy Livingstone was first in there, and he didn't pick it up, but he would recognise the smell because he worked with guns and all that. Like, so I think that's a key thing there.
And I even think Margaret, as a nurse, the paramedics, firemen, the Gardaí also would have been honed and picked up on that smell as well. Once removed and interviewed at Malahide Garda Station, Jimmy Livingstone's clothing was removed and his hands were swabbed. His clothing nor his hands showed any trace of gun residue. His fingerprints, as expected, were identified in the heavy gaffer tape which he cut from his wife's bound hands and mouth. However, additional prints were lifted from an unidentified third party. The house showed no signs of forced entry or burglary. No items were missing from the house or outside property. Shot, that's the dog, the family German pointer gun dog, was found locked outside the house in the back garden. Door handles, light switches and other items were removed from the Moorings house. Gardaí investigators have never revealed if any consequential evidence was identified from these forensic removals and examinations. And
the other thing with the dog as well is curious. The dog wasn't agitated either. Like he came home, he didn't see the dog. Like, but I mean,
didn't hear the dog barking out the back, or
So I mean, would that suggest that the dog was hardly that tame? Like, if was it somebody who came to the house regularly and the dog knew them, or what?
Again, we'll get into this in the conclusions. There are things that also don't quite add up here, and you're right to mention the dog. The roll of black gaffer tape was never found and did not originate from the Livingstone household. More oddities.
Sorry, did they get the brand? I suppose the other thing.
There is no detail on whether they ever managed to track down manufacturer, country of origin, retailer where it was bought. Again, when they were fucking around chasing Jimmy for his firearms for 300 fucking quid, this might have been what their heads should have been more focused on. A hammer was found on Connor's bed, but there is no evidence this was ever used at the crime scene. That hammer, I've no information on it other than it was a part of the crime scene. I can only presume, I may be wrong, but I can't imagine this person, whoever did this, brought the hammer into the home. I can only assume this hammer originated from the home. But I may be wrong. I don't know.
And he subdued her with whoever did it subdued her with their
subdued fists. It, but then he subdued her with the fist, so there appears no reason why the hammer would be involved. So what the hell was that? Or maybe it was a thought on the but we'll go through that anyway but I'm mentioning it because it's a necessary part of the evidence. However, just as 2 pillows from Connor's room were found in the crime scene bedroom. One pillow indicated gun residue when tested. There was forensic discussion by Gardaí as to whether the pillow could have been used as a sound muffler, but more likely the residue came from what they considered object transfer. In other words, if you use it as a sound muffler, your gun is buried under the pillow, and the shot goes off. It's going to leave burn mark. It's going to use scorching, but that wasn't found in the pillow.
To rupture the pillow anyway, possibly, because a lot of pillows are made of feathers then as well. Like, and
ruptured. So it was considered, it was more likely used as, in other words, that the residue got there through transfer. Somebody who was in touch with a gun, put their hand on the pillow, or a gun or rifle was put on the pillow, and that's where the residue, it came through transfer and wasn't directly involved. The rifle found in shrubbery in the front garden, and I want to stress this, was the .22 rifle stored in the couple's bedroom wardrobe. The crime scene and body recovered recorded no aspects of a sexual crime. While the projected 8-week High Court wrongful arrest defamation trial ended after just 4 days, filed documents and witness allegations from the Livingstone family did highlight some deeply disturbing details of Garda malpractice, threats and concocted claims and abuse of character wholly unprofessional from a police force investigation for such a serious crime of murder. Now, unfortunately, due to agreed legal settlement, Radio Espial cannot go fully into these details. However, these abuses of position did entail casting unfounded aspersions and claims on the character of Tara and Connor, claimed during interviewing questions of Jimmy Livingstone that said named people, one being a drug addict in Dublin and sure your other one is a street whore in Paris. That was what was labelled at Jimmy during investigations. Maybe you're beginning to realise why these guys decided, fuck this, after 4 days, let's get out of here, make a settlement. We don't want any more of what might come out.
That's shocking.
There are some pointers that stick out in this case that need greater examination. These come to mind as the most crucial. Grace's movements are reasonably known until around 2:10 p.m. After that, there's no certainty, which means Philip, the landscape gardener, his statement is critical. He's adamant that Grace's Ford Fiesta or any other car is not in the driveway of the 37 Moorings, Malahide, at 4:40 p.m. He turns his vehicle around, this Nissan Vanette he has, and leaves the road. So did Grace leave the house then or thereabouts and return a short time later for some reason? But someone is in the porch of that house, seen by the gardener. Perhaps preparing dinner. She forgot to buy something that morning at the supermarket and then heads out. But how does our Ford Fiesta get back there when Jimmy arrives home around 5:50 p.m? I think I've shown an image of the house, and if I don't, I'll pop it in here.
You did earlier on. Yeah,
it's a sloping driveway, but I want to emphasize the slope is down. It's not the normal sloping up. So yes, it is possible to drive a car up onto the footpath and be looking down. So it's not impossible that the landscape gardener could have seen the lower end of the porch, the yucca plant, and it being put back up by this mysterious person in the porch with the door open and then close it over. It is possible, but he's still adamant that there was no car in the garden, and that's what struck me as odd.
Well, you'd expect that if the slope was up, you'd expect he would have gone up over the hump to avoid rolling back.
Just let me. The slope is down, so you drive up onto the footpath, but it slopes down into the garden. But
that's my point, mate. My point is, if you went up the footpath,
you don't want to go too far.
Go over the hump slightly so he didn't roll backwards, and then before he backed out again, then he'd pause, he'd go into reverse. So you'd expect, so then it would be pointing downwards then. You can see it in the picture you had at the start there with the Renault Park. You can see the slope there, But so that's my point, that you'd expect he'd have just gone over the bit of a hump, so he was facing down before he went into reverse, like. So that would make sense then that he did see into the porch, like.
But the porch is slightly off. I mean, I'm kind of conflicting myself, because originally, when I knew this garden and I started examining it, that was on a slope, I just automatically presumed the slope was upwards. But when I realised it was downwards, I thought, well, okay, maybe it's possible he could have seen all that with a car in the garden, and could he be mistaken? But I'm thinking, you're in a van, a small Nissan Vanette, you pull in there, why would you be so adamant there wasn't a car in the garden if you're certain there wasn't a car in the garden? It's something that would have struck you if there was a car in the garden.
Yeah.
In other words, you wouldn't, if there was a car in the garden, you wouldn't make much of a point of it. But to be so adamant that there wasn't a car in the garden.
Yeah, but the thing is, Vic, the drive only held one car, so he wouldn't have been able to drive into it. He wouldn't, if there was a car there, he couldn't have driven into turn. So there had to be no car there. Like. If he pulled into the drive to turn, like.
Yeah, but he was pulling up in the footpath. He wasn't, he didn't need that much room. So I think whether there was or wasn't a car, but I'm still a very open mind as to whether Philip is correct. I'm inclined to go with him because he observed so much, and that it was later confirmed that his observations, particularly the plant, being a garden, he even recognised the plant. And with such information, I'm tending to lean towards the fact that he is correct. There was no car in the garden, which, frankly, if that's the case, really makes this even more puzzling. If there's no car, because there is a car when Jimmy gets home.
Yeah.
So what's going on here? So look, let's push on. More to the point, why don't the local girls, 4 teenagers, notice Grace's car exiting or entering the driveway of the cul-de-sac? If the gardener turns his van at 4:40 p.m, then by deduction, Grace is not there or out in her car at the time. So are we to assume Grace returns sometime before 5 p.m. and someone is waiting inside the house for her to return?
Or if you accept the time of death that we're saying,
4:30, they were estimating.
So was she, had she already been murdered at that stage? And assuming she was murdered. If you accept she was murdered in situ in the bedroom, and it was at around 4:30, then it was already done at that stage.
Yeah, but you see, that's my point, isn't it? About the car. The car throws things slightly out.
Does, yeah.
Then why does the gardener not notice the car?
Yeah.
Where's the car? That's there's something isn't, somebody's not right. Something doesn't, it doesn't, and it seems a very short window for Grace to head out in the car and then come back, to pick something up maybe quickly at the supermarket and that she's forgotten, and then come back and just at the right time, because again, as I said, the girls don't notice. Remember, one of the girls lives on the street. She has to walk up that way past the house. She lives at number 32. She doesn't notice Grace coming or going then. She she's observant enough to notice this guy and looks back and notices after the girls disperse, and she goes walking to number 32 where she lives at the Brennan house. She goes, oh, that guy's not there now. He must have went into number 40 or 41 or 39. She knows he must be gone inside one of those houses. So this is all at the time of this car. It's either there or it's not there. And if it's not there, why didn't the girls notice it going out or coming back?
Yeah.
It's a very short window. It just something's not right there, and I don't know whether it's information provided or genuinely Philip is mistaken and there was a car and he just somehow didn't. It just the way you can have peripheral vision, so many things to the side, but he just doesn't notice what's directly in front of him, and he just doesn't notice the car or didn't pay attention to whether there was a car there. But look, it is what it is. So we have to be brutally honest here. Grace Livingstone wasn't just murdered on December the 7th, 1992. This was not a crime of passion. An impulse of passion gone wrong, a spurned lover or angry neighbour, an opportunist burglar or charity collector looking to nick a purse or a few family jewels in the middle of a December afternoon. Grace Livingstone was executed in cold blood, bound with gaffer tape and shot at close range in the back of the head. This is a planned execution, whether carefully planned or someone semi-professional, paid and contracted to somebody with a very serious grievance involved in their own world of criminality who doesn't want to get their own hands dirty. Whoever killed Grace Livingstone had that grievance and ran deep. They knew where she lived, her movements, the locale, and there were guns in the house, and that no one else would be there at the time, and they had a rapid escape route, that they wouldn't be disturbed where the dog was, where they kept their keys, and the job could be done in a very tight window. Brian?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of things to look at there. Like, you know, I mean, even, you know, down to the, like you mentioned earlier about even the dog, like, dog not being agitated. The dog was put out the back, like, so it didn't, you know, and so on, and which was a break in routine because he said the dog was usually there. Like,
he would often say the dog was there to greet him. Commonly, you know, once he got in that front door, the dog. I think what he meant was the dog was in the house.
Yeah, and if the car was out in the street, then why would the guy move it back into the drive again after, or whatever? You know, it's just, none of that makes sense either. If he missed it because it was parked out in the street or whatever, you know, it is strange. I know the timings are approximate, like, but you know, 4:40 does sound later than what, you know.
I know. I even thought about the pillows, the hammer. Whoever did this then. Grace was bound. Now, you don't force somebody upstairs when you're in their home, whether he has a gun at that stage or not. Grace had, when those pillows moved from Connor's room to the parents' bedroom, whether they were going to be used to muffle sound or whatever the purpose, Grace had to be bound. You're not going to drag her into that room and come back into that room. You're going to go to that room because you're looking for something. You're trying to find something to muffle the sound. So she already had to be bound on the bed at that point. So he traversed, whoever it was, both rooms. So again, I can't help getting... This is somebody that had some extraordinary knowledge of this house.
Knew the house.
They knew this house inside out. Pets, keys, where things were, everything about this house.
Yeah, and the thing with the pot as well, like, you know, was that detailed at all in the crime scene report? Like, was there clay on the ground, or was there?
No, there's no detail that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
other than for what the gardener said, and I don't believe there was anything, remnants of anything knocked over, other than he reported that it looked like he upturned and was rewriting upright a pot plant, and he noticed the plant, that it was a yucca plant, and lo and behold, when he went there and the guards took him around the porch, he went, that's the plant I saw, and right enough, it was a yucca plant.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is that you wonder, will it, like, the fingerprints, I mean, if I would presume that at this stage, like, a lot of those fingerprints would have been digitally recorded. They would have been transferred from physical files to digital as well. Like, so you wonder, like, if those you wouldn't think that would be that guy's debut or swan song and that kind of stuff either.
No,
like,
no,
so
no, not a professional job like that.
No. So you wonder, like, was he even Irish? Like, was he even on the? You know, you wonder, was he even Irish if he didn't?
There was somebody that came up through the crime call.
Yeah.
And I believe they did start to have suspicions about them. I think he was a man, not dissimilar, who was travelling down I think, in a taxi towards the Limerick area, who happened to mention to the taxi driver that he'd been in the Malahide, Dublin area. And the taxi driver became suspicious because when it came on the radio about the case, and then he reported, ultimately, quick end to investigation line, he was tracked down. It turned out he'd had a row with a girlfriend in the area, and it was, I think he was travelling back to Scotland, and it transpired. Checked for fingerprints. He had absolutely nothing. It was just an alert taxi driver thinking maybe I had the guy in my car, but and there were other lines of inquiry. There was
erratic driving.
The erratic driving, the Opel Cadet, a red Opel Cadet. There were other things that were going on that were reported in the Malahide area. Another driver entering a roundabout the wrong way and was followed through Swords all the way out to a much further out area, and again nothing seems to have come of it. So look, such knowledge meant the culprit had to fit in with an affluent locale, not draw much suspicion to themselves, and beyond maybe a pair of gloves, a roll of gaffer tape, nothing more was required, and initial investigations would clearly focus on Grace's husband, Jimmy Livingstone.
I suppose there's small things as well, like that they could all fit in that overcoat if it was your man. He didn't exactly carry he wasn't carrying a sort of a kit bag. And didn't walk out with swag, hung over his back. That wasn't what he was there for. But if Jimmy Livingstone's role as a senior revenue inspector brought him into dispute or bad feeling with someone engaged in tax fraud and or criminality, why target Grace and not Jimmy directly? Jimmy did have his suspicions and readily supplied Gardaí with a list of potential suspects related to cases he himself had been involved in. So if murdering Grace in cold blood was meant to be a warning to Jimmy, well, it didn't work and actually seriously backfired. This case, along with the later Veronica Gearing case, led pretty much to the establishment of the Criminal Assets Bureau, CAB. It seems a stretch of the imagination to believe that on the 7th of December 1992, some random psychopath just happens to casually turn up at 37 in the Moorings, the home of the Revenue Commissioner, a senior investigator, along with gaffer tape he happens to have with him, no need of a firearm, knife or any weapon, and just happens to enter the house, know where the weapons are, and remember the ammunition. We haven't talked much about that. You don't just pull a rifle out of a wardrobe and go bang bang bang, you're dead, or you're threatening somebody. You have to go, okay, where's the bullets? That all had to happen. Then bind and execute a random victim that you don't know, and make good his escape without anything of value from the house, because he's just a casual psychopath, just passing through the area at the time. It seems hard to believe. Why could Gardaí never ascertain the origin of the gaffer tape used in the murder? Should be standard forensics, like.
That's just basic fucking stuff.
I know. I mean, you could, you or I could do that, Mick. You could just you walk into a hardware store and, you could at least do a preliminary investigation yourself. Walk into a hardware store, even
here's a piece of gaffer tape. I know it's not on the roll, but do you recognise it? Have you ever sold something like this? What do you think of? This is not hard stuff. This isn't rocket science.
It's basics. It's basics. Like, it's kind of, and that was it's like the basics of getting the initial part of the investigation done, and all the leads, like the leads to follow there. Like, it sounds like none of them really follow up. Like, it's I suppose the other thing is, like, I mean, if it, did she stumble onto something else or something either, like, locality?
Again, that goes back to our thoughts on why not Jimmy? Why her?
Exactly.
What's the point of that?
Your role means motive and opportunity, like, the opportunity was there, that was well sussed out, like, and the motive you know, the obvious thing to say would be, yeah, because he's in the revenue commissioner's debt, but like, was it either, like, because it was,
But
it was her they killed, and then
the motive
the
has
means,
to add up. Yeah.
yeah, you know, obviously you know, the means thing then, like, is somebody knew what they were doing, like.
Yeah. So, what evidence ballistic fingerprints were found on the door handles and light switches removed from the house? Because we know all the guns were removed, the 8 guns,
yeah,
the light switches, but we do not know anything of particularly the light switches. And I know because remember how Jimmy relates the story of the lights being off. You know, that's important kind of stuff. And let's face it, if you're dealing with heavy sticker gaffer tape, it's not surprising that there were unnamed, unidentified fingerprints on them.
It's not sellotape. There's kind of there's threads going through it. You're not going to even bite it with your teeth.
You've got to cut it because.
Or use one of those guns that you pull it out with, and it's got the teeth on it for cutting it.
If you're the classic burglar and you're wearing your gloves because you don't want fingerprints anywhere, you can't work with gaffer tape, because you try working with gaffer tape with gloves on and you'll be pulling your hand out of the glove because the glove is not going to come off the gaffer tape because it's so heavily.
You tie yourself up in knots. Like,
yeah. And of course you're going to leave fibres on the gaffer tape. So I don't know, it doesn't seem, although we have the fingerprints on the gaffer tape and it doesn't seem anywhere else that we know of, it seems odd that was this person wearing gloves then? Where did they put the gloves? Why wasn't there some fibre transfer of gloves onto the gaffer tape? Did they take them off? You know, why didn't they get blood stained? Why wasn't there residue on the gloves? Why weren't the gloves left there? Why weren't the gloves maybe dumped somewhere? They dumped the rifle. So this person, we know because the dog is at the back garden who shouldn't have been there, wasn't normally there. So they've had access to the back garden.
Yeah.
They've had access to the house. They know where all the keys are. They know where all the points are, where the guns are, wardrobe, bedroom cabinet, hallway. I think there was another rifle kept. And then we know that the actual gun that did the deed, the .22 rifle, is found hidden away in shrubbery, not in the back garden, the front garden. So that person has exited through the front
door, yeah.
Has walked out, won't say into daylight because it's dark then, but has walked out brazenly off on his way.
Down the cul-de-sac and out the other side.
Down the cul-de-sac, off out. Don't know what happened. Dumped the gun there. And yet nobody sees it. There's so many aspects of this case I can't get my head around. Notwithstanding the car, whether it was there, it wasn't there. The whole idea of why this person could not be fingered straight away within days when there's fingerprints on the tape, when it's such a brazen thing. You know, when you think of gangland hits, it's balaclavas, motorbikes, bang in, do the job, bang, 30 seconds, get the hell out of here. And they make it's so brazen, everybody knows about it, but nobody knows who they are. But this wasn't like that. This was so subtle and casual. Blend in, do the job, go in, maybe spend a bit of time in there, get the dog sorted out, wear the keys, guns, all the guns, then move the pillows in that room, have to take time to bind the ankles, you know, that takes time. All that takes, that didn't all happen in 5 minutes. That person had to be in that house at least for 15-20 minutes, at least.
Yeah.
And if you start off at 4:30 and we're given at 4:30, that person had to be there till shortly before 5 p.m.
Yeah. Is it definitely just one person? There was no evidence there was anyone else there.
We don't know of any evidence that there was anybody else, or any suggestion evidentially that there might have been somebody else.
Yeah.
So we can also ask, why did Senior Gardaí indulge in a smear campaign of Jimmy Livingstone and his family soon after the murder, and ignore multiple other obvious lines of inquiry from someone posing as a charity worker, and at least 2 suspicious vehicles driven erratically at the critical times? We touched on that about the roundabout car going the wrong way, and the cadet and somebody else looking suspicious in the car. If Jimmy Livingstone is not a suspect, and they never had a file against him sent to the DPP, what actual efforts have Gardaí made, and later CAB, to investigate the list of names he gave to them for potential people that may have been involved? Why have Gardaí never revealed if they followed up on numerous anonymous phone calls following the murder, and repeated again following a 1994 crime call appeal identifying a person of suspicion known to Gardaí with criminal connections, and later the subject of CAB investigations from 1998? Who and what are Senior Gardaí afraid of following this case, and why were they so quick to settle the High Court case in 2008 after 4 days, when it was very clear the judge was open to allowing more information to be entered into court evidence?
Yeah, that says a lot there. I mean, the fact that there was no file even prepared or anything, or for the DPP, like, I mean, that shows that there was.
If they really, really and truly thought Jimmy was involved in some way, shape, or form, yeah, that's the argument. Then where's even the preparation documents?
Yeah,
for the
exactly.
DPP?
That's my point.
There's nothing. There is nothing. Other than, I'm going to get this fucker for those guns. Yeah. Jesus, lads, is that it? Is that what this amounts to?
Yeah.
Is that what you got? You know.
Yeah. So now, they only hurt themselves really with that, because if they were determined, believed, and determined to prove that he did it, then you have to, they know the process better than anyone else. Like, you gather your evidence, put it in the file, send it to the DPP. That was the only way they were going to nail him. Like,
yeah.
So why didn't they do that? Like, because that's that was the only way they were going to get him convicted for it. Like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my only final thoughts are, this was certainly somebody who had a very deep knowledge of Jimmy's work, the people connected to him, the cases he was involved in. I can still never get my head around why they went about it the way they did, or what was the purpose of not targeting Jimmy and rather his wife, as if to send a message to him. But, like, wouldn't it be just easier if you went to all this effort? Wouldn't it be just easier just get rid of Jimmy? Or perhaps they felt, well, if Jimmy's gone, there'll just be another senior investigator who'll step into the case. But maybe if we give Jimmy a bit of a warning, he'll kind of start to push away evidence and go, Jesus, I don't want me daughter or son to start disappear next year, the year after. Or maybe that was their thinking. I don't know, but it's.
So you wouldn't know either. I mean, could the plan have been to take him out of it when he got home as well, like? And maybe the car pulling into the driver, there was something else happening. They thought, oh God, we got to get out of here, and then it was too close for comfort that they didn't.
It's possible. Maybe they thought both of them were going to be home at that time. Yeah,
because that would fit in with, like, if it's 4:30 she's there, and then if he's due home at, well, I suppose
you would have been 5:30, 6
would
o'clock.
Would have been 6 o'clock, all right, like, but was the plan to take him out of it?
Yeah, or one of the other. I think Barry Cummins, when he covered this case in his book, he also suggested, is it possible that the confusion in this case is this was some sort of maybe gangland criminality, maybe somebody connected to the Republican movement for the IRA, maybe trying to impress people, a sort of half-botched semi-professional job. They kind of knew what they were doing but didn't quite know what they were doing, and he said, and they were trying to impress their bosses. Hey, see, I can get rid of that person you don't like or do damage to them. I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, I think if it was the IRA, they'd have admitted it. They said they didn't. So
they said they didn't, but then hey, they've the IRA have denied certain things that we now know that wasn't quite the case. So I'm not entirely sure I would take them at their full. But this doesn't. Frankly, if this was an IRA job, frankly, it would be short, sharp, and sweet. There wouldn't be all this messing of tape here. She would have been done in the supermarket in broad daylight. Bang, you're gone. End of story. Back of the head in the supermarket, going to the car park to get her car. End of story. We don't mess about in the evening. Yeah, we've other people to deal with later today. We've got a busy schedule. That's not the way the IRA work if they're gonna take you out.
It's a total mystery, really. So
It really is. In this case, there's so many aspects of it that are baffling.
Sadly, unless something pops with the fingerprint or something like
the fingerprints are the most likely way on whatever the Gardaí have on the any of the guns that were collected. If somebody was prowling through that house, going to the guns, the handguns, thinking which one will I use, and all this and the tape, and at this stage, if you ain't got anything now, I don't know when you're gonna have anything.
Yeah, no, not looking too hopeful. No. All right,
no.
All right.
Okay, look.
Very sad case. So.
Yeah, very, very sad, and particularly the despicable manner in which he was treated, and Tara and Connor,
family, that language about the daughter.
Yeah. That's not the way you do things. And by the way, hey guys, we know your names. We know the Gardaí who ran this case. We won't forget this.
And the tragedy there, they lost their kid, their little sister, and they lost their first child there as well.
Maeve, I think the third child that Grace sadly didn't have. Guys, not the brightest of notes, but we'll try to end things on a brighter note. We wish you all well. We're recording coming up to this Easter weekend. We wish you all a safe and blessed Easter weekend. Have a good holiday. Brian, we're hoping maybe next week, we're not totally sure, we might have a surprise interview for you. We'll see. We'll tell you about that more when we have news on it.
We'll do.
For now, take care, everybody. Thank you again, Brian, for joining us. We'll see you all soon for episode 69.
All the best, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.